47 seconds. This was the exact amount of time that passed in the room after Hank Johnson asked that question. For 47 seconds, Pam Bondi stared at the congressman sitting across from her. She could neither confirm nor deny. He couldn't say a single word to explain the existence of 500 lawyers who are claimed to have secret files belonging to Trump. He just sat. He looked, and he remained silent. Bondi had gone to that hall prepared, as always. She had 3 lawyers by her side. He had 2 advisors behind him. That familiar stance, chin slightly raised, shoulders straight, with the expression, "I've overcome much tougher challenges than this, I'll handle it too," on his face. For someone who had come from the Florida Attorney General's office and was shaped by decades of legal practice, such sessions were considered routine. But Johnson hadn't come that morning to ask a routine question. If you're new to this channel, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what happened in that courtroom today was no show. These were the questions the Justice Department and Pam Bondi never wanted to answer, and Johnson didn't get up until he got an answer. The Judiciary Committee had started that morning with an ordinary session. The agenda items were clear, the order of questions had been predetermined, and everyone seemed to know their role. In the media rows, a few reporters were looking at their laptops. Committee members were rifling through their files. Bondi was whispering with her lawyers across the table. There was that familiar feeling in the air of, "Nothing is going to happen?" Then Johnson took the microphone. His voice didn't rise. He didn't pound the table. He didn't make any theatrical entrance. But everyone in the room noticed that someone straightened slightly in their seat when they heard that first sentence. "I have documents showing that there are more than 500 lawyers still employed by the Justice Department working on cases directly connected to the Trump administration." The sentence ended. The room fell silent. Johnson looked directly at Bondi and continued, "These lawyers are not externally appointed names. These are individuals who were hired during the previous administration, holding career staff status. But right now, the files they have directly overlap with the most sensitive investigations of this administration. And where are these files going? Who sees them? Who archives them? Who makes decisions?" Bondi tried to interject. He talked about the procedures. He spoke about the legal framework. He explained how state institutions operate. Johnson didn't wait. "I'm not asking about the procedure, Ms. Bondi. I'm asking for the result. I'm asking for the result." When Johnson put the first document on the table, the cameras reflexively turned to him. It was a 3-page internal memo. At the top, it had the label, "Confidential for authorized personnel only." According to the document, a specific unit of the Ministry of Justice had been managing over 500 files, which have been actively updated since 2021 and classified under the heading "Legal Proceedings Related to the Executive Branch." Some of these cases were related to individuals who had never been in the public eye at that time. Some of them were very well-known names. How many of the lawyers on this list still have access to those files as of today? Johnson asked, looking Bondi in the eye. Bondi hesitated. "All staff are subject to standard security protocols." "This is not the answer to the question, Ms. Bondi. Access permissions are reviewed periodically." "This is not it either. I'm asking for a number. How many people?" Silence. Bondi's chief attorney leaned forward and whispered something in his ear. Bondi shook his head slightly from side to side. No, he would answer himself, but he couldn't answer. If you've watched this far, like the video, because Johnson didn't stop here. The main question had not yet come. Johnson took the second page out of the folder. This time, the list was longer. There were no names, only codes. Next to each code, there was a category. This document was taken from the Justice Department's own internal classification system, Johnson said. And here we see Category 1, Political Sensitivity, 87 files. Category 2, Executive Branch Protection, 143 files. Category 3, National Security Exception, 210 files. Category 4, Active Archive, Restricted Access, 64 files. Total 504 files. And all of these cases were being handled by the same unit, the same lawyers. Executive Branch Protection, Johnson said slowly. Ms. Bondi, what exactly does this statement mean? Whose protection? Which executive branch? What Period. Bondi replied, "These types of classifications are made according to the institution's standard protocols. So who can see these files if they request them? Personnel with the relevant security clearance. Who else but the 500 lawyers?" Silence fell once more. The expression on Bondi's face hadn't changed, but his eyes had momentarily drifted to the folder. Everyone saw that move. Johnson raised his head and looked at everyone in the room. Then he turned back to Bondi. "So you don't know who has access to these files. You don't know where these files are going. And you don't know what the 500 lawyers managing these files are working on today. But they all work under your ministry's umbrella." Bondi tried to say something. Johnson continued, "And you are the head of this ministry. And you are the head of this ministry." A step back is needed here. Pam Bondi, who served 2 terms as Florida's Attorney General and has a strong legal record, was appointed to this position. Her supporters described her as a resolute, ideologically consistent person capable of restructuring the institution. Critics, however, have painted a different picture from the start, but what Johnson was asking was not an internal party attack. The question was much more technical, and that made it all the more dangerous. If there are 500 lawyers within the Department of Justice placed during the previous administration working on confidential files related to the current administration, was Bondi, the current head of the department, aware of this? If she was aware, why didn't she disclose it? If he is not aware, what does that mean? Both options are disturbing, and Johnson inserted both into the recorded statements. When Johnson pulled out the 3rd page, the energy in the room changed. This document was different. It had dates. There were concrete data. "This is an internal report prepared by the Human Resources Unit of the Ministry of Justice," Johnson said, "and it shows that in the last quarter of 2023, just before the election period, the number of lawyers working in a specific unit increased by 34%. He paused. 34%. In less than a year. Was an extraordinary period being experienced? Had a new investigation been opened? Had there been a budget increase? No. The only thing is that the team has expanded, and exactly which files this team is working on, Ms. Bondi, is still unclear today." Bondi interjected, "Staff planning is done according to strategic corporate needs." "What need?" Johnson asked. "General legal capacity enhancement. 500 lawyers. Classified files, 34% increase, pre-election period. Do you define all of these as general capacity enhancement, Ms. Bondi?" Bondi did not answer. One of his lawyers raised his hand to speak. Johnson turned to him. "Your client can answer himself. Your client can answer himself." "I want to ask you this, Ms. Bondi," Johnson said. His voice had dropped. This was not the voice of a debater, but of a prosecutor. And the room felt it. "Do these 500 lawyers have access to files directly related to the Trump administration as of today? Yes or no?" Bondi couldn't answer. "Have these files been shared with third parties without the current administration's knowledge? Yes or no?" Again, silence. "Are there any pieces of information within these files that the public does not know but should? Yes or no?" The 47-second silence began right here. Johnson didn't look at his watch. He didn't drink water. He just waited. All the cameras had turned to Bondi. All eyes were on her. And Pam Bondi, the Pam Bondi who had answered thousands of questions in courtrooms over the years, couldn't even speak. 47 seconds. Then Bondi spoke. His voice was lower than usual. "Such questions are not suitable for answering in an open session." Johnson shook his head, slowly, as if noting something in his mind. "So it can be answered in a closed session. Some matters. Then I request a closed session. Officially, today, this week." The committee chair spoke. "The request has been recorded." Johnson dropped the microphone. Bondi looked at the table, and the room continued to remain in that silence. Johnson did 3 things that day, and these 3 things made it into the court transcript, along with Bondi's name. First, he shared internal correspondence documenting that more than 500 lawyers were working on secret files related to the Trump administration with the public and gave Bondi the opportunity to respond to them. Bondi could not respond. Secondly, it brought to light the classification categories of these files, along with the codes used: executive branch protection, political sensitivity, national security, exception, 143 files. And Bondi couldn't explain what these codes meant. Thirdly, he officially recorded the request for a closed session. This request now has to be answered procedurally, and this answer has to come from Bondi's ministry. The 47 seconds of silence are also on record, officially, in an unchangeable way. If you have watched this far, share this content with your circle, because the situation within the Ministry of Justice is not a partisan issue. It is a matter of institutional transparency. And Pam Bondi couldn't answer that transparency question in a single word today. What will happen next? If the closed session request is approved, the documents in Johnson's possession will be questioned in a much broader context. Which lawyers have access to these files? Which investigations are these files related to? When did Bondi become aware of this information? If it didn't happen, why didn't it happen? If it is not approved, that is also an answer. A rejected transparency request indicates the existence of something that is not intended to be disclosed to the public. And Bondi's signature will be under that rejection decision. In either case, the questions Johnson asked today will continue to hang in the air. 500 lawyers, 504 cases, 47 seconds of Bondi's silence. These numbers are not just digits, question marks. And if you want to closely follow where this investigation will go from here, which names will come up in the closed session, and what is inside the file coded 143 Executive Body Protection, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because this is not the final point, just the first comma. 500 lawyers, 504 secret files, a 34% increase in staff before the election, 47 seconds of Bondi silence in response to the question. And the request for a closed session is now on the record. Bondi's department has to respond. Hank Johnson did not make an accusation today. He put documents on the table. And Pam Bondi couldn't respond to those documents with a single word. Sometimes the strongest answer is the one not given. It is the answer that was not given. And today, that answer Pam Bondi couldn't give lasted 47 seconds. It is now in the official record. And now no one can take it back. See you in the new videos.